Most people who say they understand AI right now actually only understand one tiny piece of it. They understand the part where you type something into ChatGPT and it types something back. And that's totally fine. That's the doorway. But here's the thing that nobody tells you. The gap between making an API call to a language model and building an actual agent that can go and do work for you is enormous. And I'm going to explain every single rung of that ladder in the most comprehensive and easy to follow way that I can, with analogies, without using any jargons, and not assuming that you already know any of this. Here's specifically what you're going to walk away with. First, you'll actually understand how a large language model works under the hood, including the one that makes it feel almost magical and a little unpredictable. Second, you'll understand the invisible plumbing that sits between you and the model and the stuff that turned prompt engineering into context engineering and made RAG and agents possible. And third, you'll understand what genuinely separates a model from an agent and why that one distinction is the most valuable thing that you need to learn about AI agents in 2026. And this isn't just theory. The teams shipping real production AI right now, every single one of them, is built on the exact ladder that I'm about to show you. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand how these systems actually work better than 95% of the people posting about AI on the internet. And if words like transformer, decoder, or vector database have ever made you feel like you're not technical enough, I promise you by the end of this video, those words are going to feel very obvious to you. So just stick with me because we're going to start at the very bottom of the ladder. And in 30 minutes, I'm going to teach you all you need to know about AI agents. Okay, let's start at the bottom rung. The brain of every AI system that you've ever used is a large language model. So what is it actually doing? Here's a friend over coffee version. A large language model is nothing but a prediction machine. That's pretty much it. You give it some text and its entire job is to predict the next most likely piece of text. Imagine the smartest autocomplete that you've ever seen. One that has read basically the entire internet, every book, every Wikipedia article, mountains of code, and learned the patterns of how humans put words together. When you type "the sky is," it knows blue is the far more likely word to come than green. Now scale that intuition up to billions of parameters and you get what can write essays, it can debug code and explain even quantum physics. But at its core, it is still just a prediction machine that is predicting what comes next, one little piece at a time. Now those little pieces aren't actually whole words. They are actually tokens. A token might be a word or part of a word or even just a punctuation mark. The model reads your inputs as tokens and generates its answers also as tokens, each one based on everything that came before and after. So when ChatGPT looks like it's typing in real time, that's not a special effect. That's the model literally predicting the next token, then the next, then the next. Now, it's slightly more complicated than that, but I think that understanding is good enough for you now. Now, here's the part most people find surprising. If you ask a language model the exact same question, you can still get two different responses. And people go, wait, isn't this a computer? Aren't computers supposed to be deterministic? That's a great question. Let me explain where that unpredictability or non-determinism actually comes from. When the model predicts the next token, it doesn't just pick one single answer. It produces a whole list of possible next tokens, each with a probability. Maybe blue is 80% likely, clear is 10%, grey is 5%, and so on. Then instead of always grabbing the top one, the model rolls a weighted dice and samples from that list. Think of it like a chef who knows a recipe by heart but improvises slightly every single time. So the dish is recognizably the same but never identical. And to be honest, having that unpredictability also is what makes a model creative. Now, there is a setting that controls how wild this gets. It's called temperature. Lower the temperature, the chef sticks to the recipe, which is where the LLM is more predictable. Higher the temperature, the chef gets creative and surprising. So the LLM is going to produce more interesting responses. So at the end of the day, the non-determinism is not a bug. It is actually a feature. It's the dial and it's the reason why these models feel alive and creative instead of sounding robotic. Alright, now you know what the model does. The natural next question is how? And to answer that, I have to introduce you to the single most important invention in modern AI. The thing that made all of this possible. It's called the transformer model. So give me 60 seconds and I'll explain you this. Back in 2017, a team at Google published a paper with one of the best titles in research history. It was called Attention is All You Need. Now, before that paper, language models read text the way you would read a sentence through a tiny keyhole, one word at a time, left to right, and by the time they got to the end of the paragraph, they have basically forgotten how it started. The transformer model basically threw it out. The big idea was something called as attention, which lets the model look at all the words at once and decide which one matters to each other. So here is a good analogy. Imagine that you're at a loud dinner party with 10 conversations happening at once. Attention is your brain's activity to tune out the noise and focus on the three people whose words actually matter to what you're trying to understand. When the model reads the sentence, the trophy didn't fit in the suitcase because it was too big. Attention is what lets it figure out it really means the trophy and not the suitcase. That ability to weigh relationships between all the words simultaneously is what unlocked everything. That's the whole 60-second story of Transformer. Now, inside the original Transformer, there were two halves, and these two words trip people up constantly, so let me make them dead simple for you. The two halves are called encoder and decoder. The encoder is just the reader. Its job is to take your input and deeply understand it and to turn your words into rich internal representation of meaning. So think of the encoder as the person in conversation who's truly listening, absorbing and understanding what you said. So an encoder model is purely for text understanding. Now the decoder model is the writer. Its job is to take the understanding and produce output one token at a time. So the decoder is the person who then opens their mouth and responds to your questions. So the decoder essentially is a text generation part. The original 2017 Transformer used both. And the reason is pretty simple. It was built for translation. Just picture a human translator. First, they listen to the full French sentence and understand it completely. That's the encoder part. Then they speak the English version. That's the decoder part. Encoder is what's understanding and decoder is what's producing. Read, then write. As simple as that. So here is the question you might be having. If the original design had both halves, why do the models that we use today, like the GPT ones, only use one of them? Because here's the plot twist that changed the entire field. It turns out that for open-ended generation, like writing, chatting, coding, you don't actually need a separate understanding stage. You can just use the decoder and have it pay attention to everything that came before, including your prompt, and keep predicting the next token. The understanding and the generation is happening in the same machinery of the decoder. This is what we call as a decoder-only model. And almost every model that we're using today, whether it's GPT family or Claude or Gemini or Llama, all of them is decoder only. It just has one job, which is predicting the next token, done at massive scale. And the magic is that this is incredibly simple objective. When you scale it up to trillions of words and billions of parameters, it gives you something that can reason, summarize, translate, and actually even write code. The simplicity here is the superpower. Now, a little bit of a history lesson. I want you to appreciate how many things have changed because it wasn't always this way. Rewinding back to 2018, the hottest model in the world was BERT, also from Google. And BERT was the exact opposite. BERT was encoder only. It was brilliant at understanding, classifying text, powering search, detecting sentiment, and it learned by playing fill in the blank. You would hide a word in a sentence and BERT would guess it. But BERT couldn't sit down and write you a fluent 5-paragraph essay because that wasn't what it was built for. It was a reader, not a writer. Then the world flipped. The decoder-only generative models came along, which is the GPT family. And instead of fill in the blanks, they played keep the story going. Just predict the next word forever. And it turned out that keep the story going at enormous scale was the unlock for the chat assistant that now we use every single day. That is the entire arch of modern AI in less than 2 minutes. Now, from readers to writers, from understanding to generation, from BERT to models that is running half of the internet today. See, that history lesson wasn't as boring, right? And that right there is rung one of the ladder. A single decoder only model which is predicting tokens that you reach with one API call. But here is where it gets interesting because that brain has senses that you haven't even met yet. So let me introduce you to those senses. So far I've been talking about text in and text out. But the models got senses. And here's the one idea that unlocks this entire chapter. What defines the modality of a model is simply what kind of input it can take in and what kind of output it can produce. That's pretty much it. Let me make this concrete for you. A plain language model takes text input and gives you the text output. Now imagine that you give the model eyes so it can also take images and video as input. We call that as VLM or Vision Language Model instead of a LLM, which is a large language model. You can show it a picture of your fridge and ask what you can cook, or hand it a screenshot of an error and ask it to debug. It is pretty much the same brain, but it just got new senses. Now let's flip it around to the output side. If the model can produce images as output, that's called an image generation model. The Midjourneys of the world or DALL-E of the world or ChatGPT Images 2.0. If it can produce video as the output, that's called video generation, which is exactly what happens with models like Veo or Omni. Now notice that pattern. We didn't change the fundamental idea of a prediction machine. We just changed what's flowing in and what's flowing out. That's why you'll hear the word multimodal everywhere now. A multimodal model is one that can juggle several of these at once. Text and images in and text out, or text in and images out. Think of it like a person who can read, see, listen, speak, and from the same brain instead of needing a separate specialist for each senses. That's basically a multimodal model. Okay, so now you have a brain. And the brain has senses. But here's the thing. A genius brain that just sits around is not as useful. You have to know how to talk to it. And the way we talk to these models has quietly gone through a complete revolution. Let me show you the plumbing that nobody sees. I'm sure you would have heard of the phrase prompt engineering. And lately, you've also probably heard people debating that prompt engineering is dead. Let me give you a real picture here. It is not dead, it has just evolved. And understanding what it evolved into is the difference between somebody who is just playing with AI and somebody who actually builds with it. Let's start with what prompt engineering actually means in the most basic level. Prompt engineering is just the craft of how you interact with a model, how you phrase your request to get the best possible answer. In the early days, this was the whole game because the system was simple. You typed something, your raw text went straight into the model responded, which was a direct line. So the entire skill was in wording your prompts cleverly. But here's what changed, and this is the part most people are completely missing. Today, when you're chatting with a tool like ChatGPT, your message does not go straight to the model. There is a whole layer of plumbing in between. Your prompt is actually getting transformed, wrapped, and enriched before it even reaches the brain, which is the LLM. Let me give you a restaurant analogy which will make it easy for you to understand. When you order a dish at a restaurant, you don't just walk into the kitchen and hand the chef your raw request. There's a whole process. A waiter is actually writing it down. The kitchen has standing rules about how every dish is plated. They pull the right ingredients from the pantry and only then does the finished plate come back to you. Now that kitchen, all of the invisible preparation happening backstage is the plumbing of a modern AI system. The language model is just the chef. The chef is one important part, but the chef is not the restaurant. So what's actually in that plumbing? The first big piece is that your query gets post-processed and assembled into something bigger before it even hits the model. And the most important split here is between two kinds of instructions: the system prompt and the user prompt. The user prompt is fairly easy. That's the thing that you have typed, your specific request right now. But the system prompt is something that most people don't see. It's the persistent set of instructions that stay with the model across the whole conversation. Think of the system prompt as the job description and the user prompt as today's specific task. The job description says that you're a helpful, careful assistant who explains things simply and never make things up. The task may say, explain transformers to me. Same employee. But the job description shapes how they handle every single task that you give them. That system prompt is doing a huge amount of invisible work to make the model behave the way it does. Now stretch that idea out and you arrive at the thing that replaced prompt engineering, which is context engineering. Here is the core realization. The model only knows what's in front of it, what's inside its context window. A context window is nothing but the limits of what a model can process at any given point in time, which is basically its short-term working memory. The model has no idea who you are, what happened yesterday, or what's in your company's document unless you put that information into its context. So the real skill is no longer just wording a clever prompt. The real skill is engineering everything that goes into the context window. That's basically context engineering. Let me now walk you through the components that go into a well engineered context. And you can picture this as a diagram with a model in the center and all of these feeding into it. You've got the system prompt, which is the persistent instructions. You've got the user prompt, which is your current request. Then you've got the conversation history, so the model remembers what you said 3 messages ago. Then you've got the retrieved knowledge, which is just the relevant documents that you pulled in from the outside of the model, which we'll talk about in a second. Then you've got tool definitions, which are just descriptions of the actions that the model is allowed to take. And then you have got memory, longer term facts about you and the task. Now, context engineering is the discipline of deciding what goes into that context window and in what order and how much of it. So the model has exactly what it needs and nothing that distracts it. It's the difference between handling a consultant a clean one-page brief versus dumping 10 years of disorganized files on their desk. Now, the job of creating that one-pager is called context engineering. And one of the most powerful pieces of that context, which is the retrieved knowledge piece, deserves its own chapter because it has a name that you've definitely heard. It's called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And it is how you make a model that knows everything in general actually knows something about your specific world. So let's get into it. As I said, RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And I know that sounds like a mouthful, but the idea is genuinely simple. Here's an analogy that I always come back to. A language model on its own is like a brilliant student taking a closed book exam. The student could be incredibly smart, but it is limited to whatever they memorized during the training. And that knowledge has a cutoff date. RAG is what turns that into an open book exam. Before the student answers, you let them flip to the exact right page of the textbook. Suddenly, they're not guessing from their memory, they're actually answering from a source in front of them. So RAG has 3 parts. The name literally spells that out. Retrieval, augmentation, and generation. Retrieval is the first step. This is where the model goes and finds the most relevant information, usually from something called as a vector database. A quick intuition for a vector database is that it stores your document in a way that lets the system search by meaning and not just keyword. So when you ask a question, it pulls back the chunks of the text that actually is most relevant to what you meant. To understand vector databases well, you need to understand a concept called embeddings. Embeddings is nothing but converting your text data or your audio data or your image data or your PDF data into numbers or vector embeddings. Once you have converted them to vector embeddings, you combine your original text, your vector embeddings and metadata and store them in a vector database. That's pretty much it. I've actually created a detailed video on vector database, so I'm just going to link that below so you can go check it out. Now coming back to RAG. Augmentation is the middle step and it's often something that people forget. This is where you post-process the retrieved documents before handing them to the model. In this stage, you might re-rank them so that the best one comes up, trim the irrelevant parts, clean them up, and format them neatly into the context. So you're basically prepping the ingredients before they actually go to the chef. And then generation is the final step. The model takes your question plus those clean retrieved documents and generates an answer that's grounded in real, current and specific information rather than just looking through its frozen trained memory. That's how you build an AI that can answer questions about your company's internal documents or this week's latest news. Now, I'm keeping this tight because there's a lot more nuances here. Things like chunking strategies, embedding models, and the more advanced agentic versions of RAG. I've already recorded a full video that breaks down RAG end to end. So if this chapter gets you curious, go check out that RAG explained video. The link is going to be in the description below. So now look at how far we have climbed. We started with a single model, we added more senses, we engineered its context, now we gave it an open book with RAG. but it's still fundamentally a thing that responds when you poke it. It cannot really do anything on its own. So, how do you really get it from being a smart responder to an actual agent that takes action in real world? That's the top of the ladder, and honestly, it's the most important distinction in all of AI right now. If you've made it this far, you're already taking this more seriously than most other people. So stay with me till the end. Now, before we get into agents, there's still one more upgrade to that brain itself that I have to mention because it's the foundation everything else stands on. It is called reasoning. A regular language model answers fast. It blurts out the most likely next token, almost like answering on instinct. A reasoning model does something different. It's been trained to think before it speaks. It generates a private chain of thought, working through the problem step by step before giving you the final answer. It is the difference between a student who shouts out the first thing that comes to their mind and a student who actually works through the problem out on a scratch paper first, then writes the clean answer. For hard tasks like math, logic, complex coding, that scratch paper thinking makes a massive difference in accuracy of the model. You know, models like OpenAI's O series and DeepSeek's R1 made this approach famous. And it's why reasoning models are the engine of choice for most serious agentic work. Okay, so now we have the brain that can think carefully. Here's the single most important distinction in this entire video. What is the actual difference between a model and an agent? Here's a simple analogy, and I want you to really hold on to this one. A language model is the brain. It's the thing doing the thinking, the reasoning, the processing, all of that. But a brain floating in a jar cannot really do anything. It can think brilliant thoughts about booking your flight, but it cannot book your flight. It becomes an agent the moment you give that brain a body. You give it hands and legs and tools that can go and actually do something in the world. That's the whole thing. A model thinks, an agent thinks and acts. The way we give a model hands and leg is through something called as tools. A tool might be the ability to search the web, to run code, to query a database, or to send an email, or to call another API. When the brain can decide to reach for a tool, use it, see what happened, and decide what to do next, you no longer have a model, you have an AI agent. So how does that loop actually work in practice? The most fundamental pattern is something called as REACT, which stands for reason plus act, and it's beautifully simple. The agent reasons about what to do, takes an action by calling a tool, observes the result of that action, and then reasons again about what to do next, given what it just learned. So think, act, observe, and think, act, observe. It's exactly how a detective works a case. Form a theory, go check a clue, see what the clue reveals, update the theory, and go check the next one. The agent loops through that cycle until the job is actually done. That single loop is the heartbeat of almost every agent being built today. React is just the entry point. There's a whole family of agentic design patterns, and Andrew Ng has talked about 4 of the big ones that I want you to at least have you in the radar. So very quickly we'll go through this. First one is reflection, where the agent critiques and improves its own work, like a writer editing his own draft. Then there's tool use, which we just covered, which is basically giving the brain hands. Then there is planning, where the agent breaks a big goal into sequences of steps before actually executing. Then finally, we have multi-agent collaboration, where you have several specialized agents working together like a team. So a researcher and a writer and a reviewer all passing work to each other. Each of these is a way to take that basic brain and make it dramatically more capable. And we go deep on all 4 inside our program. So that's the top of the ladder. We went from a single API call to a model all the way up to reasoning agent that can plan, use tools, and collaborate. That's a full journey. But there's actually one last piece. And that last piece is what separates a cool demo from something that you can actually trust in production. So let me give you a very quick 2-minute version for that. This is the uncomfortable truth about AI agents, right? They are non-deterministic. Remember the weighted dice from the beginning that we spoke about? That means the same agent can behave differently on the same task. So how on earth would you know if your agent is actually good? How do you know if a change that you made improved it or quietly broke it? That is exactly what AI evals or AI evaluation are for. Evals, or short for evaluations, are simply how you measure whether your AI system is doing its job well. And here's why it is so much harder than normal software testing. With a regular code, the answer is either wrong or it's right. 2 plus 2 is 4. End of story. But agentic systems live in a world of qualitative judgment. Was that answer helpful? Was it grounded to a source? Or did it make up something? Was the tone appropriate? Was it safe? Now, all of this is slightly fuzzy human questions. And here's the key insight. Every agentic system is incredibly specific and niche. A medical intake agent, a customer support agent, and a coding agent, all of them needs to be judged completely with different standards of what good even means. So the real work of AI evals is taking all of these fuzzy qualitative things that you care about and turning them into concrete quantitative metrics that you can actually track. You define what good looks like. You turn it into numbers and then you can measure relentlessly. Because truly, you can't really improve something that you can't measure. Okay, so I'm keeping this short on purpose because evals deserves their own deep dive. And that's exactly what my next video is going to be about. I'm going to break down how to actually build evaluations for your agentic AI systems step by step. So make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and you don't miss it. Now, if you walk away from this video remembering one thing, let it be this. Everything in AI, from a single chatbot to the most sophisticated agent on the planet, is in this same ladder. A model is going to be the brain, the context is what you feed in, tools are what turns thinking into doing, and evals are how you know if it is actually working. Once you see that ladder, you can never unsee it. And you'll understand any new AI system or product launch in about 30 seconds with that. So look at what you can do now. You can explain how a language model actually predicts text and where the creativity comes from. You can describe the invisible plumbing that turned prompt engineering into context engineering. You can explain RAG to somebody at your dinner party, and you can articulate the exact difference between a model and an agent, which, trust me, a lot of people are still fuzzy on. Now, every tool, paper, and resource that I mentioned, including my vector database video and RAG explained video, is linked down in the description below. Now, here's the honest truth. Watching a video like this gives you a mental model, but you don't actually learn to build agents by watching. You learn by actually building. And if this video got you fired up to go build your agentic AI systems with your own hands, that's exactly what my co-founder Arvind and I have created Gen Academy for. The Gen Academy is an AI educational institute, and our mission is genuinely to empower everyone to become an AI builder. Our flagship is a certification program for mastering agentic AI, where we take you through everything on this ladder in real depth over 6 weeks, along with building hands-on expertise. Starting from foundations of LLM, going deep into RAG, context engineering, agentic design patterns, deep into AI evaluations, fine-tuning and post-training, and AI security and safety. And here is what makes it different. We do not hand you recorded videos and let you watch along. We run live lectures twice every single week, plus live office hours also every single week. So you're learning directly from us and getting your real questions answered in real time. And these aren't going to be toy tutorials. Take a look at some of the projects our students have built in just 1 week of their current cohort. We are obsessive about delivering real hands-on value and also building in public, because shipped work is the only thing that actually levels you up. Now, if there is a voice in your head right now saying that, I'm not a coder, this may not be for me, I need you to hear this. More than 35% of our current cohort are non-coders and non-developers. People who are product managers, marketers, founders, and GTM folks. If that's been your mental block, please drop it right now, because you can absolutely become an AI builder, and that's exactly what this program is built for. For every single week's project, we have 2 different tracks. For people who are developers, we give them code-heavy track, and people who are non-developers, we give them low-code, no-code track. And we're not doing this alone. We have partnered with companies like NVIDIA, OpenAI, Llama Index, LangChain, Pinecone, and many more to get our students free credits and to bring in AI experts from their team to give live guest lectures. So you're learning not just from me and Arvind, but also from people who are actually building AI in cutting edge. You can find all the details on our website, and you can actually see the full week-by-week curriculum on our Maven page. Both of them are linked in the description below. And if you've got value out of this video, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon. I regularly post about AI and machine learning career tips, free resources, and educational breakdowns just like this one. Plus, I share my journey building a career as an AI leader here in the US. Also, drop me a comment below. Tell me what are you working on right now, tell me what did you like about this video or you didn't, and tell me what I can create next.